I'm Jan Tedder. I'm a family nurse practitioner and a lactation consultant. And I've had the great honor and privilege to work with young families for many decades now. And Ning and I often talk about the fact that, our patients and the babies we work with teach us so much about our area of expertise. Certainly those mothers and those babies are really the experts around us most of the time. And I feel like Hug Your Baby really makes an effort to learn from and experience the lives of those that we serve. And so you are part of those people. We're so happy to have you with us today. Jim and I were uh, saying as we finished our dinner this evening, and then we went in and just kind of combed our hair and said, well, now we're ready to go to Malaysia. It doesn't take much of an effort to come all the way across the world by using Zoom. But I want you to know that we miss you. We miss traveling and getting to know people face to face. And so hopefully that this interaction we'll have tonight is the beginning of relationships and sharing of stories back and forth. I'd like to begin by introducing you to my beloved family and just to say that they all send a big hug your way. They know how important the Hug Your Baby work is to Jim and I. My husband, Jim Henderson's with us today. And also I'd like to say that we've always thought of Hug Your Baby as a part of the birth and lactation and parenting community around the world. And so we are especially sharing joy in our changeover of leadership in our country this past month, where we feel like we share an interest in being world citizens. So um, again, we send our love and thankfulness to you. So some of you may wonder, how was it that you ended up here tonight? And let me just share with you this sort of short journey. It began back in about 2012 when Jim and I were planning on being out of the country and doing some teaching for a year. And my colleague here, Dr. Miriam Labach, some of you may have known her. She was a senior advisor at UNICEF and then came to my area to begin a global breastfeeding institute where I came to know her. And when she heard of our travels, she was kind enough to connect me to Sita Norgina Morin, which I know many of you know. And I had the most lovely time getting to know Sita. Sita then eventually connected me to a hospital in Shah Alam, where I did two all-day programs for birth and lactation professionals and parents as well. And to my surprise, at the first break that day, four lactation consultant and physicians came up and said, we are so excited you're here because we've been studying Hug Your Baby on the internet. And how surprised I was to think that Hug Your Baby, the internet Hug Your Baby, had already beat me there. And it was such a blessing that I met them that day because Dr. Ning and I stayed in touch both during my visit there. She took me to several of the postpartum care centers, made some home visits with some of her families. And it was just such a wonderful time to learn about the very special care provided mothers and babies in Malaysia. And she and I have kept up over these past 7 years. It's been, we would from time to time have Zoom or Skype visits and talk about lactation patients we were struggling with, giving each other ideas and support in our work. And so how delighted I was about 4 or 5 months ago when she said that she had been talking about Hug Your Baby with two of her colleagues in Malaysia. And the three of them decided that, well, why don't we see about bringing Hug Your Baby back to Malaysia virtually? And so you all may know that we did that back in January. We had our first gathering and how surprised all of us were when 330 people showed up to take our Hug Your Baby training that evening. And another several hundred were trying to get into the program, but we were kind of jammed up and they couldn't get in. And so we decided to have this extra program today. So that is how you've all come to be with us today. We have representatives from 9 countries, including Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, China, Singapore, Venezuela, Paraguay, USA, and the Philippines. So thank you for being with us. And we're trusting that this time will be time that is meaningful and well spent for you. So here we were, a group of folks planning this gathering. And one thing we wanted to do with this gathering was just honor and send our love and appreciation to Norgina, who you probably know passed away in October. But it is true that none of us would be here together tonight if it weren't for her contributions and her welcoming of us to your community. So just to let you know that in the next couple of days, I'll be sending out an email to each of you who came to our gathering, and we'll have a detailed handout, including references to the material I'll be covering. So you can kind of sit back and enjoy listening and watching rather than having to take so many notes. We hope that'll be helpful to you. So certainly we come from different backgrounds. I know from your registration that we have physicians, midwives, parent educators, nurses, lactation specialists, early childhood specialists. We all bring our unique experiences, our unique passions to this work. And so I'd like to begin by learning a little bit about those of us who are here. So I'm going to launch this Hug Your Baby Zoom poll and see if we can find out a little bit about you. So I'd like to, at this point, ask Dr. Ning to share with us a bit of her story about what inspired her to spend time and energy on the Hug Your Baby materials.
My name is Ning. I practice as a doctor and lactation consultant in a community setting, and I mostly work with young families. So I find that regardless of whether I'm helping them out with their breastfeeding related issues or medical concerns or both, I often hear parents say to me, Dr. Ning, I wish my baby came with an instruction manual. I don't know what my baby wants most of the time. And I don't know whether what they're doing is normal or not. People around me seems to know my baby more than I do. I feel like I'm failing my baby. As a mother myself, I could totally relate to that. I remember how stressful it was trying to figure out my own babies back then, 15, 20 years ago. Believe me, it did not help when people said to me, oh, don't worry, you'll figure them out soon enough. Or oh, but Ning, you're a doctor, you should know. Well, so when Jen came to Malaysia in 2013, I attended her workshops for healthcare professionals and also for parents. I tagged along with her on several occasions to meet other families and other parents. I observed how Jen interacted with parents and their babies. And from what I saw, just by using simple words and simple gestures, Jen helped parents see what their babies are capable of and how responsive their baby was to them. Parents were pleasantly surprised. I mean, they were saying, "Oh, I didn't know my babies could do that," and they were smiling, and the relieved and confident look they had on their faces after the session was priceless to me. So that drew me in towards Hug Your Baby. I've been studying Hug Your Baby and I've been using Hug Your Baby strategies in my practice ever since, as fast as I can, as much as I can. Because my aim is not only to help parents with their breastfeeding issues or their medical concerns, but also to empower parents with simple and practical ideas for them to use so that they can respond to, connect with, and enjoy early communication with their baby. I believe um, every parent and child is unique. Every family unit is unique. There's always new things for me to learn. And I guess that's why I keep going back to Hug Your Baby and I continue to tag with Jen until today.
So, yes, don't you love what Ning said about every parent is unique? And I think that idea that that every encounter, what is just work for us, going to work and doing our job, we can actually experience sort of the magic of of that encounter with a baby and a family if we understand that that baby is unique and that that parent is unique and that opportunity is unique that we have to share with a family then. So thank you, Ning, for sharing with us today. So let me introduce you to some families and stories that may sound familiar to you. Have you ever heard this? Why won't you look at me? You must not love me as much as I love you. Or how about, my baby wiggles and squirms off and on all night long. He must need some formula instead of my breast milk. Or maybe you have heard, let me see if I can mute us all again. There we go. Or maybe you've heard, she cries now more than last week. I'm not much use around the house these days. So, what is interesting about what we've just heard from three families is that they are describing normal infant behavior. This is completely normal the way these babies are reacting. But what is happening is that the parent is misunderstanding that baby's behavior, misinterpreting what they are seeing, and it is causing them either to feel bad about themselves as a parent or to maybe take actions which will not really benefit the baby. For instance, adding cereal or giving up breastfeeding simply because they misunderstand their baby's behavior. So this has been sort of the background of the development of Hug Your Baby. And what does the research tell us about this? It tells us that if a parent misunderstands a baby's normal behavior, there are really significant consequences. For instance, there is some interruption in the developing of a loving and effective parent child relationship. There's an increase in postpartum depression. There is lowering breastfeeding duration. And finally, there's even an increased risk of child abuse and neglect when parents misunderstand their baby's behavior. So what's been on our mind as Hug Your Baby with Hug Your Baby is how we can foster that understanding of a baby's behavior. So those of you who are able to find your thumbs up and your thumbs down on your uh, Zoom call here. See if you can give me a thumbs up if you have heard these kind of stories from families. Have you heard parents express concerns about behavior which you actually know to be normal behavior? Does this kind of ring true for you? Let's see if we can see some thumbs up about that. Yes, as I would expect. This is not, Narina has heard it. Yes, thank you, Narina. Yes, thank you. Yes, and I think that these kind of concerns are common for those in parenting and lactation support. So Hug Your Baby likes to ask the questions, what should we teach parents? And how should we teach parents? And that's what we're going to be thinking about this morning. So this little one is reminding us, she's reminding us that you should be teaching my mom and dad about baby's normal behavior. And you better teach my mom and dad about how a baby's changing development impacts the parenting and breastfeeding experience. So when we think about the impact on the developing parent-child relationship, it takes us to this literature called responsive parenting that is really becoming very common in the child development literature. And let me just give you a quick overview of this literature. Of course, we know that that tiny little newborn, inside that tiny little newborn's brain, every second, a million neuron connections are happening. There's just this massive proliferation of neurology going on inside that baby's brain. And what's interesting, I think, is expressed in this image, the image of a forest. And if we look at the forest on the left, what we see is lots of trees and leaves and branches, and we kind of look up and it's all around us. And yet we can find that we are sort of lost. We don't sort of see our way to where we're going. Whereas the picture on the right, we look up and see the same leaves and trees and branches and all. And yet there is a path forward. And what the child development literature lets us know is that every interaction between a baby and a parent, like we see here on this picture, every interaction causes sort of a pruning away of that kind of not functioning, not so helpful neuron development, and instead to create pathways of important connection. So that in fact, this responsive parenting that we see in these lovely pictures is actually the foundation or the kind of core of a baby's emotional, intellectual, and even social development. So, all of us know that this is true. But I'm just kind of wondering, are there ways that we can incorporate this into our teaching of parents? So I teach a class called Understanding Your Newborn. And I start the class actually with exactly the slides and the information I just shared with you. And I've been surprised after people come to class, some of the stories I've heard. Oops, let me just remind you to please mute yourself. We're could everyone please mute themselves? Thank you. Um, I'm surprised at some of the stories I've heard because I remember this dad saying to me, I told my wife that what seemed to me that this early parenting thing was just kind of what she was going to do. It was going to be all about that breastfeeding thing, and that just seemed like it was pretty much my wife's job, right? He said, but then when you talk to us about responsive parenting, I realized that every time I looked at and talked to my baby, if I was changing a diaper or if I was giving a bath, or if I was taking my baby on a walk, that I was nurturing my baby's long term emotional, intellectual, and social development. For that dad, understanding that background really made a difference, really kind of enhanced the importance of that time he spent with his baby. So, the World Health Organization lets us know that there are three steps to understanding to this responsive parenting. So, these three steps are at first, to notice a baby's behavior, second, to understand and accurately interpret that behavior, and third, to take action on that behavior. So, let's think back about those families early on. What about that mother who said, my baby wiggles and squirms all night long. My breast milk must not be strong enough. I need to add some formula. Well, that was a mother who was noticing behavior, but she was misinterpreting that behavior because she didn't understand about the difference between light and active sleep. Or that daddy who was saying, my baby's crying, my 2 week old baby's crying more now. So I'm not much use around him here. So he also was noticing a behavior, but he was not understanding that a little bit more fussiness in a 2 week old is normal behavior. And so he was misinterpreting that behavior. So I have a little exercise that I think kind of brings attention to this idea that sometimes we notice things without understanding them. And so, if you could imagine that you're joining me on a stroll through a street in Paris, and we come upon this sculpture of two giraffes, this metal sculpture of two giraffes, and you notice this, you think, I know what that is. That's a giraffe. But then as you go around the corner, you suddenly go, oh my goodness, is that a giraffe or an enormous elephant? I thought it was a giraffe. Let me go back around and see what is it really? Well, in fact, it is a giraffe and an elephant. So I thought that was just a fun example of how when we enhance our ability to notice something and we enhance our ability to understand what we see, we actually become more curious about what we see, and we can become more accurate about what we see and what we understand. So that is really a core of what we think about in Hug Your Baby. We think about, if we can, as this slide reminds us. Whoops, wait a minute. Yeah, let me get back to my funny slide. There it is. This slide reminds us that we ourselves can develop eyeball exercises where we train ourselves to notice more about babies, and we help our parents, we give the parents we serve kind of eyeball exercises to notice more about parents and parenting as well. So we might ask the question, does this matter? And the child development, the pediatric literature really lets us know that this is critically important, that when parents practice responsive parenting, there is lower postpartum depression, there's more confidence in the parents, there is higher breastfeeding rates, there's lower family stress, and even recent literature has shown that there's lower incidence of obesity in that baby and that toddler, and even on up until the teenage years. So let's think about those eyeball exercises. And when I think about eyeball exercises, I think about my mentor, Dr. T. Barry Brazelton. I hope some of you know about him. He was a pediatrician at Harvard. He just passed away 2 years ago at the age of 100. And he spent a remarkable career, sort of centered around two bodies of work. The first being the Neonatal Behavioral Assessment Scale, which is also called the NBAS, and the touch points, which we'll get to a little bit later when we're talking specifically about breastfeeding. So the NBAS is a remarkable exam that can be used with newborns to help us look very closely at a baby's behavior. So when we look closely at a baby's behavior, we can gain information that helps us understand the impact of certain external events. What is the impact of a on a baby of a mother who had malnutrition during pregnancy? What is the impact of neonatal jaundice on a baby? What is the impact of a mother's depression or a mother's drug use on a newborn? And so his exam involves looking at 18 different reflexes and 28 different behaviors. And all of those 28 behaviors are scored on a scale 1 to 9. So you could imagine, I actually got certified in this exam many years ago. And I felt like it was like so amazing that there was so much to see about a baby's behavior. It was the best ever eyeball exercises I ever took. But you can imagine this is a very complex exam, and it's used as a research tool around the world. But let me give you just an example of the type of information that it was focusing on. So, for instance, let's look at a baby here. One baby who was born 2 weeks early, and look at this baby's ability to orient or kind of look at a toy. And also the second baby is actually a baby that I met in Malaysia with Ning might remember this baby. And this was a baby with a mother who was struggling a little bit with postpartum depression. And part of her problem was that she felt like her baby wouldn't look at her, that her baby would keep looking away from her. So let's look at these two normal babies. This little baby is making such an effort to look at the toy. You see that his eyes look up a second and then they look away. His eyes glance a second. He looks like he's almost breathing fast, and his arms are kind of limp beside him. He is struggling with that ability. This baby is very squirmy. We see him having jerkiness of his hands, a little overshooting of his hands when he moves, and it seems like he is distressed by his own movement. But when we swaddle this baby just a moment, look how this baby is able to attend to this little toy and show his mother, Mom, I can do this. I can pay attention to the world around me, but I just need a little bit of help. And so this mother gets to experience, oh, I have a very smart little baby. So, what the Brazelton NBAS exam does is it always calls on us as providers to bring out the best in a baby. We are only successful as a parent educator or a pediatrician or a lactation consultant if we can kind of see a baby's competencies and share that competency with a parent. So let's look at another behavior, thinking at a baby's motor maturity. We're going to first see a baby that was born a couple of weeks early, and again seeing normal behavior for that age child, and then a full term baby and seeing again normal but more mature behavior. So this baby, this little one, is demonstrating these quick jerks with a startle reflex. See his hands tremor and jerk, his legs tremor and jerk as well. This baby can reach her arms way over her head without any jerkiness or overshooting, moving his legs back and forth without much jerkiness. So, again, we're looking at a range of normal behavior. The mother on that first baby said, Is my baby having seizures? Well, you can imagine why a mother might think that, not understanding that jerkiness was normal given that baby's gestational age. So, as professionals in the field of babies, we want to be able to understand that range of behavior and how a baby, as they grow and develop, will move from sort of one set of behaviors to another set of behaviors. So it was really fun to show the mother, the first mother there with the baby with the less mature behavior. I said, it's going to be so exciting over the next few weeks. Every time you're playing with your baby, you're going to see less and less of that jerkiness. In fact, you can even kind of steady your baby's hands against her chest while you're talking to her. And that might relax her and help her be more able to look face to face with you. So, our ability to understand that behavior, interpret that behavior with the parent is really critical. So, understanding this behavior like this led to the development of the Hug Your Baby 20-minute parent education video, Understanding and Caring for Your Baby. And it focuses on helping parents prevent and solve problems around a baby's eating, sleeping, crying, and interaction. And so we don't have time today to go through the entire video, but we are going to see portions of it. So, one of the things I came to understand in my career is that words we use really matter. And I know that all of us have had the experience, probably as patients and working with patients, that it's easy to use the kind of professional language we were taught in our training. So when we think about what parents need to understand, we want them to understand a baby's sleep wake cycles and their state changes. And we want them to be able to identify a baby's physiologic stress response. And probably most of us learn to identify newborn states, 6 states: deep sleep, light sleep, drowsy, quiet, alert, active alert, crying. And as we watch these different states, I was always getting a bit confused trying to remember all 6 of those states. And I certainly did not feel it was reasonable to try to explain those 6 states to a parent. So, Hug Your Baby had this idea of instead describing 3 newborn zones: the resting zone, the ready zone, and the rebooting zone. And I think this is language that parents can identify with because, when you say something like the baby's in her own zone, or she's zoned out, you get this feeling that you're talking about sort of general behavior. And so I think that these words are really easy for a parent to understand. The resting, sleeping zone, the ready, I'm ready to play or I'm ready to eat, and the rebooting, when I get a little overwhelmed, I might fuss and cry for a few minutes and reboot myself. And I'm thinking that if we when we are able to share this information with parents prenatally, then we can find ways to integrate this into our conversations with families when we meet them with their new baby. Say, for instance, here, a mother is in, say, for her 2 week visit with her pediatrician. And you know that that mother came to your understanding your newborn class and is familiar with this language. So you're watching the baby, and all of a sudden you see the baby start to get kind of red in the face and jerky with her movement, and maybe kind of starting to squeeze her eyes shut a little bit. And you say to the mom, "Oh, I'm seeing that your baby's showing us a few of those signs, like he's on his way to the rebooting zone. What do you find helps him when you start to see that?" And the mother kind of leans back and looks very confident because she had in fact grown to appreciate that in her 2 week old. She says, "Well, when I start seeing that, I pick my baby up, I cuddle him up really close right under my neck, pat him on the back, and start singing his favorite song, and his little body relaxes." And sometimes we can avoid that rebooting, fussing, and crying zone. Or you have another mother who says, maybe on a lactation visit, the mother says, "Well, it's time for the baby to eat now. It's been a good 3 hours since she ate. Listen, just a minute ago she was awake, but look, now she seems like she's gone off into that resting zone." And again, you say to the mother, "Yeah, we talked about that before with that video. Well, what do you find helps your baby to get from that resting zone a little bit more ready to eat?" And the mother says, "Well, I change her diaper. Sometimes I take off her shirt and I just put her skin to skin. And this just a few minutes, she starts to wiggle and squirm and goes right on the breast." So again, it's an example of how if we give language to our families that is accessible language, understandable language, simple, not complex language, that then we can share that language in our follow-up support, education, and care that we provide. So, the next thing that we want to think about is a baby showing us a physiologic stress response. This is what the medical literature calls us, what we're seeing here when a baby is kind of overwhelmed by the world around them. But nobody wants to know that their baby is having a stress response. The baby is stressed out already. So, Hug Your Baby had this idea of instead, we're going to say, that your baby is sending out an SOS. And SOS stands for sign of overstimulation. Now we all know what happens when a boat, someone else stranded on an island, sends out an SOS. It just means I need a little bit of help. So the baby is saying, Mom, Dad, I need just a little bit of help now. So I'd like to share the part of the video that both talks about and shows us what a baby's SOSs look like and let you hear from a mother the importance of understanding those SOSs was to her.
The second parent skill is recognizing when your baby sends out an SOS. SOS stands for Sign of Overstimulation. All newborns are at times overstimulated as they adjust to being out in the world. Babies born early SOS more often. The first way babies send out an SOS is with changes in their body skin color, movement, and breathing. This baby, who was born a few weeks early, shows these body SOSs. See how his face turns a bit red in color? His muscles jerk and shake, and his breathing gets faster. The second way babies send out an SOS is with changes in their behavior, spacing out, switching off, and shutting down. This baby demonstrates the first behavioral SOS, spacing out. Watch as Jan plays with the baby by shaking a rattle. The baby begins to look like she is staring into space. Spacing out is a sign of overstimulation. This baby demonstrates the second behavioral SOS, switching off, described in the medical literature as gaze aversion. The harder the mother tries to get the baby's attention, the more the baby looks the other way. This switching off is a sign that the baby is trying to manage the amount of stimulation she takes in. Mothers are relieved to learn what this behavior means, and that it is not a sign that the baby is rejecting her. This baby demonstrates the third behavioral SOS, shutting down. Again, we see Jan playing with the baby. Though the baby is momentarily engaged with this play, she soon begins to get drowsy and shuts down as a response to too much stimulation. When you notice your baby having an SOS, you wonder how to help. You can respond to an SOS by decreasing stimulation and increasing support of your baby. Decrease stimulation by speaking quietly to the overstimulated baby. Increase support by holding your baby's hands against his chest or gently swaying him. Putting your baby skin to skin or breastfeeding him will also decrease that SOS.
This is little Maria, who's now 2 weeks old, but she has a special story because she decided to come into this world 4 weeks early.
Well, of course, because I've had four kids, I kind of know what to expect. And in the hospital, she just had little tics where she would jerk or her eyes would roll in the back of her head and she would just fall asleep at the drop of a dime, and we would change her clothes or weigh her even. The startle reflex would just be really too much for her. She would turn beet red and scream, and just it seemed so traumatic. Next, you explained to me about premature babies being overstimulated and how they can shut down to keep from processing that information so it doesn't overstimulate them. They kind of shut down, and you gave me some information that showed me how to keep her from going to be overstimulated.
Here she is at only 2 weeks old, and she is already way past her birth weight.
So yeah, this is 6 months later. With Miss Tedder's help, we learn how to keep our babies comfortable and how to make sure that we don't overstimulate our babies. And because of that, we have a 6-month-old superstar. When I tell people she's a preemie, they just laugh and say, "Yeah, right."
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, you have so much to say. Go on about that.
So now I'm going to give you a little example of how you kind of can put these ideas together, understanding a baby's ability to orient and also understanding us having a sensitivity to a baby's showing us some SOSs. And I'm going to give you some steps to helping a baby orient, helping show a parent their baby's remarkable capabilities.
The first step to interaction with a baby is to ask the baby's permission. Are you ready to play with me right now? Her body language will answer this question. Does she start to wiggle and squirm, increase her breathing, or look away from me in a way that says, I'm not quite ready now?
Oh, hi there. Hi there. First, I'm just going to look you in the face and make sure my talking face doesn't overwhelm you. So when I see that yawn, I hesitate a moment. That's right. Waiting for you to get back to the ready zone. Here we go. Now you're starting to have a little bit of movement. And sometimes if I see you getting a little bit extra squirmy, I can bring you up and down. Now you're looking away from me. Are you switching off a little bit? You're looking away from me. That's okay. So I'm waiting for you to look back. There you are, looking back. And I'm going to move my head now. Are you ready?
Now that she is ready, be sure that you are ready. Hold her bottom securely with your dominant hand. Keep her at that 45-degree angle and pay attention to the position of your other hand. I'm resting her head on the first knuckle of my left hand. You'll see that my fingers and thumb surround the baby's head, but do not restrict the movement of her head.
So that then, when I move, she will be able to move her head. All right, here we go. I'm going this way. I'm going this way. I'm going this way. Yes, that's great. You calm your body right down. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go this way. There we go. So yeah, I can do that really well. All right, now I have a little toy to play with you. Oh, you like that idea. You smiled when I said I had a little toy to play.
Remember, a baby sees best about 10 inches or 25 centimeters from her face. Because healthy babies can habituate and ignore a repeating stimulation, varying the pace of the shaking rattle is more likely to keep the baby engaged. I move the rattle ever so slightly ahead of the baby's gaze. Then I hesitate and wait to be sure her eyes can keep up with the moving rattle.
So I always want to hesitate and respect your need to kind of regroup a bit. So again, just imagine if a family is feeling kind of insecure about being a new parent, how empowering it would be for them to see the competency of their baby. And thinking about the competency, I was working with this teenage mother who was really at high risk as far as being a young mother, and certainly at high risk for not breastfeeding. But this mother succeeded in becoming a very effective parent. And we think that it was had a lot to do with her prenatal education, where she learned to read her baby's body language. Listen to what she has to say about her baby.
But I thought it was really special the way that Carson communicated to us as a tiny little baby. And I wondered if you would share a little bit about how you learned to read his body language and what that meant to you.
Yes, when we were talking, you were showing me some of the little signs, like him squinting his eyes, and him like moving his arms wildly and his legs. That means that he's been overstimulated. So we tried different things, like putting his arms close to his chest and swaddling him and rocking him back and forth, and that seemed to help. You can tell the difference between when he's being overstimulated versus when he's just closing his eyes and being calm.
Yes. And I remember, I love that when we talked about this, you said you were going to teach your sister and your mom, and so y'all all were paying so much attention to these little ways that babies communicate. That's great.
Babies are very smart, smarter than what we think they are.
Isn't that what we want all of our families to know? How smart babies are. So the next part of the video that we think about the baby's development is of the family's response to the baby's crying. And of course, we know that all babies start to increase their crying a little bit around 2 weeks of age. It peaks at around 6 weeks and then tapers back off. And there's been a lot of research about helping crying babies. And it seems that the bottom line about all the research is that if we give parents skills to observe their baby's behavior and then very specific steps to sort of part of the comforting behaviors, then that those parents feel more confident and are more successful in calming their baby. So the steps that the video describes are first using your voice to comfort that baby. Then try holding the hands to the chest, swaying the baby as this daddy's doing here, wearing the baby, putting the baby on the breast, and even swaddling for just a few minutes to calm that older child. Then we move on to some information about baby sleep patterns. And of course, like you and I, babies have two kinds of sleep. They have active light sleep and still deep sleep. And this is basic information that most of our new families don't get. And I find that is so important for them to notice these behaviors and understand what they mean. So this is my favorite part of the video, actually, when we are demonstrating what these sleep cycles look like. And we hear a mom talk about her experience learning these sleep cycles.
This baby shows us what still deep sleep looks like. Her body is still. She surprises her mother by not responding to any stimulation. There is no movement of her eyes and her eyelids stay shut. Her breathing is deep and regular and she makes no sounds. Every hour or so, a newborn will transition from this still deep sleep to active light sleep. This baby is in active light sleep. Her eyes might flash open. She puckers her mouth, makes sucking movements, vocalizes, and can even smile. But this baby is not waking up. She is just transitioning from her still deep sleep to her active light sleep. In only a few minutes, we observe that she transitions back to still deep sleep. Her parents are delighted to learn that important brain development occurs during the active light sleep cycle.
I would wake up every time he made a whimper at night thinking he needed to breastfeed. I just was exhausted. I didn't get any more than an hour of sleep at a time, and that was a maximum. He seemed frustrated. I seemed frustrated. We're both crying in the middle of the night. When I met with you and you started talking about the active sleep and the deep sleep, it made a lot of sense.
Could you describe what it looked like to you to see him having what you think now was active sleep?
Yes, active sleep looks almost like awake sometimes. His eyes even open, flash, look back and forth. His arms shoot up and they shoot down. Sometimes even a cry or a whimper. And what I come to realize through your training and DVD is that he can stop that on his own. And now we have a wonderful nighttime relationship.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about this other body of literature, the literature that both Dr. Brazelton's touch points ideas and the infant feeding and practice study 2 research. So Dr. Brazelton shared this idea with us that right when a baby is going to have a surge in her development. For instance, this little baby is a sitting little baby and she's getting ready to be a crawling little baby. Right when a baby is having this surge in her development, a funny thing happens. There is this disorganization, a temporary disorganization in a baby's eating, sleeping, and general behavior. So, for instance, maybe a baby was only getting up now, maybe once or twice at night to breastfeed, about the time that they were learning to roll over, for instance. And all of a sudden, the baby starts seeming a little bit grumpier during the day and waking up 4 times at night. And the mother thinks, well, I guess it means that my milk's not strong enough. I better start adding some formula at night or a little cereal before he goes to bed. That would be a misunderstanding of that baby's behavior. So, the good news, of course, is that we understand when these developmental
Betul
events will
lah,
occur.
Puteri.
We know that they're going to occur at predictable times. And I guess the question is, do we make it our business to give families anticipatory guidance about when these developmental events are going to happen? Now, the infant feeding and practice study, too, has been really a well documented study. And what it looked at, it called, there were 1,500 families who continued to breastfeed. And they called these families every month to see if they were still breastfeeding. If they weren't breastfeeding, they got them to document the reason for stopping breastfeeding. And of course, you could imagine a 1 month old mother, a mother with a 1 month old may give up breastfeeding if she still has pain with breastfeeding. A mother going back to work at 5 months that doesn't have support in the workplace may give up breastfeeding now. Or a mother with a 9 month old who's going through separation anxiety and suddenly is up and down half the night might give up breastfeeding. So, the reasons that sort of trigger the change are going to be different according to the baby's age. But what was so interesting about this study is every single parent said, my baby is not satisfied. That somehow they saw this behavior. And so instead of understanding it as normal behavior in a baby and understanding that it was saying something about the baby's development, they assumed that their baby was not satisfied. And so therefore, breastfeeding was not really working. So, my view is that this information very much connects to our efforts to breastfeed. And it actually led to the development of the roadmap to breastfeeding success. And this has been this program I've been working on for about 10 years that looks at the developmental events between birth and 1 year that impact a baby's development. And are those events cause a changes in the baby's development and then can cause the baby to cause the mother to give up breastfeeding or to add formula or solids prematurely. So I hope that you've all looked at the Hug Your Baby Malaysia website page and seen the beautiful roadmap to breastfeeding success that was created by our Malay committee that worked so hard to bring this program to you today. So when we think about the first part of the roadmap, we're looking about at the education we give families prenatally. We want them to understand the importance of breastfeeding, the importance of going to a childbirth and a breastfeeding class. We want them to be able to identify where is their support, both personally and professionally in the community. And we want them to, of course, hopefully begin to understand how to read a baby's body language. After giving birth, we want these families, of course, to understand the WHO recommendations about skin to skin care, breastfeeding the first hour, avoiding pacifiers and bottles, and avoiding formula unless medically indicated. And we also want them to be able to notice those early feeding cues and also to reinforce that mother's reason for breastfeeding, because that can be helpful in the weeks and months ahead when if she has some struggles with breastfeeding. In that 2-week-old baby, we want them to understand about that normal change in crying and that babies can have a growth spurt at around 2 weeks. And at 1 month, we want them to, by then, to be able to identify that active light sleep and that still deep sleep. But we also want that mother with a 1 month old to know that her breast milk composition is going to change. So imagine that one of your midwife students did a great job explaining to a mother in a newborn nursery that she would be able to monitor how well her baby was being fed by monitoring the baby's stools. That a healthy newborn ought to be having 6 stools a day in order to assure the baby is getting enough calories. So if the mother gets up to 4 weeks and 6 weeks old and does not understand that the change in her proteins in her milk is going to change that baby's stool. So we know that we go from about a 10% casein there at before 6 months up to a sort of 50-50 whey in casein. And when that happens at about this time, babies start having a couple of stools a day, or as we know, even sometimes skipping a day. And if that mother didn't know ahead of time that this was expected, this was normal, she may worry that there is a problem with her milk supply. This same mother can have the experience that the breasts are no longer feeling full and empty like they did early on. And that, again, if the mother didn't know that this was normal, she might worry that she has a problem with her milk supply. Now, the roadmap goes on to show us in the 4 month old that there are two important developmental events occur. The baby begins to roll over, and some babies get very excited about that. And also, the baby has this surge in his mental development, so that all of a sudden he becomes very distracted during breastfeeding. He pulls off the breast and the mother is likely to worry, oh my goodness, is my baby trying to wean? So let me introduce you to the world's cutest baby here, who happens to be my grandbaby, my grandbaby girl, and see how she did a great job exhibiting these two developmental surges.
A 4 to 5 month old is on the way to exciting motor and mental development. Notice this baby's determination, frustration, and then surprise by rolling over. In just a moment, the baby seems pleased with her accomplishment and is ready to explore the world from this new perspective. Rolling over often happens at the same time a baby becomes increasingly aware of her surroundings. See how she pulls right off the breast when she hears another voice? This distractibility is normal at this age. It is not a sign that the baby wants to wean. Instead, it's evidence of important mental development. Mothers learn that breastfeeding in a less stimulating environment often helps the baby settle down for her meal. Babies who are especially sensitive to developmental surges may be energized by these developmental changes and begin to awaken more at night. If a mother does not anticipate these changes, then she might think her baby is hungry and needs more nighttime calories. However, mothers who understand developmental surges can continue the breastfeeding pattern that was working before the changes began. Now is a good time to practice comforting your baby back to sleep without adding more nighttime feedings. Be sure to watch the Bumps in the Road video on this roadmap page.
So, of course, we don't have time to go through each of the developmental steps, but of course, in the 6 month period, we talk about adding solids and getting that first tooth. 9 month, the development, beginning of stranger anxiety and how that can cause babies to wake up more at night and what that means about a baby's wonderful development. And that 1 year old who is pulling up and learning to walk, and how almost all of those babies start waking up more at night. And again, if mother understands that's a normal change in behavior from the baby's remarkable development and not a sign of a breastfeeding problem. So then, of course, Hug Your Baby is interested in how we teach, and this baby is reminding us strategies for effective teaching, because we know that parents don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so Hug Your Babies developed these 3 hug strategies, but we're just going to mention one of them today. My favorite, the see then share hug strategy. And if we're lucky, one of our folks will talk to us about this at the end of the program today. The idea is to be able to see the baby's behavior and share that information with a parent. And so we teach this technique called commentating and broadcasting. And it really comes from the world of sports, where if a sportscaster is broadcasting a sporting event, he's telling you just exactly what he sees happening on the court or in the field. Commentating describes the importance of what you're noticing. And so, in the world of parenting and breastfeeding, broadcasting means as professionals saying exactly what we see the baby or the mother doing, and then commentating, describing the importance of that. And we want to be as specific instead of general or global as possible. So, for instance, here is a beautiful breastfeeding baby. And you might say something general like, oh, you seem to be enjoying breastfeeding. Oh, your baby's doing such a good job breastfeeding. Those would be general statements. But what if you broadcasted something very specific like, oh, I see that the baby is turned belly to belly. His ear and his shoulder and his hip are lined up. Oh, I see that you're supporting your breast with your left hand. It, as I'm watching, I'm seeing that your baby is able to suck, breathe, and swallow very effectively because of the excellent position you have the baby in and the way you're supporting the breast. So see, I was broadcasting the behavior and then I was explaining the importance of what I just saw. And this has been actually one of the most exciting techniques to teach birth and parenting and lactation specialists. And they are quick to tell me that parents love this approach because what they can say is, you are talking about my baby, my experience. You're not making generalizations about breastfeeding. You're talking about me and my baby. So let's zip through a little bit of the research that we've got on Hug Your Baby and the resources, and then we'll be ready to finish up for the evening. We're happy that Hug Your Baby has been identified as an evidence-based program, and the handout you'll be getting lists these resources. We have three kind of review articles that cover the child development, pediatric lactation literature used to develop the program. Then we're most excited about a number of research projects that looks at the positive impact of using incorporating the Hug Your Baby program into nursing schools, working with some Japanese nurses, some doulas, and some lactation specialists. Then the impact of using it with very specific groups of parents. Parents in the special care nursery had increased confidence before they went home with their new baby. Childbirth educators found that their parents had more confidence about their ability to meet their breastfeeding goals. Fathers who had babies in the NICU, who received Hug Your Baby teaching, had more confidence and knowledge about infant behavior, as did teen mothers who were exposed to the material. And this most wonderful article is now on the way to being published from some Japanese researchers that showed that mothers in a control versus an intervention group had lower anxiety, lower postpartum depression, and actually lower risk of child abuse by in the intervention group who received Hug Your Baby teaching. So we are quite excited about that literature. We are also excited to share our resources. And as I mentioned before, the Hug Your Baby DVD helps to explain to parents about a baby's behavior. It's available in 6 languages now, but of course, we mostly want you to know that on the Malay website, you'll be able to have access to the roadmap and to the DVD, which is now available in English, but maybe you'll have some ideas about having it translated into Mandarin and Malay in the future. So we found that during these times of COVID and just the busy lives that professionals lead, that the use of online training can be very effective. And so our materials really are all available online now. So we have 3 main 2-hour courses. They are all approved for lactation credit. The first one is helping parents understand their newborn. The second one is the Hug Your Baby strategies I spoke about. And the third one is the roadmap to breastfeeding success, which is the full description of the roadmap program. And then for those who are interested, we do have a final course which allows you to document your use of the materials and share your experience with the training, so that one could become a certified hug teacher if they wanted to. So, what are the next steps ahead? Well, I love this quote. A tiny shift in perspective can make a world of difference. And so I'm thinking about these babies. Look at these babies. You may be wondering, did this little workshop we have increase your interest and your curiosity about what these babies are saying with their body and their behavior? And how can you effectively enhance your ability to communicate that information? If you have had a tiny shift in your point of view about this, then I will feel like I did what I set out to do. However, some of you may have a little bit of a different experience, and maybe you feel a little bit of a tug or a little bit of a pull to the question, is there more? Is there a better way? Is there additional ways that I can understand a baby's behavior and help the families I serve understand that baby's behavior and anticipate the upcoming changes in their baby's behavior? So if there is, we hope that some of you'll consider some of the Hug Your Baby materials. We certainly have the materials for those of you who work with individuals. Also, for those of you who maybe work on more of a community level, you are in a parent education center or help to run a breastfeeding organization, that you can make these resources available to the people in your organization. And finally, we know that some of you teach professionals, whether you teach breastfeeding, peer counselors, family physician, midwives. We've had great success in the United States in incorporating one of our 2-hour trainings into the training in some nursing schools, and have had really excellent research that's being published on that. So considering how you might do that. And then also, if you are a researcher and you have those amazing skills to analyze and evaluate programs, we hope you'll consider joining us in some of our research endeavors. So our little committee here is planning a follow-up meeting in April. We'll send you a reminder about this. We might review a case study or consider feedback that's been offered at this meeting, gather your thoughts about if there's any translating that might be done, answer your question, and explore your ideas and resources. So this week I'll send you an email, because we reduced all the uh, course prices to 30% off for anyone who's taken our Malay workshop. You'll get the handout. You'll also get a certificate of attendance, because some people from our last class asked that we did that, that we provide that. And also we'll create a recording of this program and make that available, and invite you to share it with any colleagues who might not have been able to visit with us today. So now two of our other committee folks here agreed to share a little bit of their story. Shakin, would you mind giving us a little bit of your wisdom?
Thank you very much, Jen, for such a great session. So it's morning here. So good
Yeah.
morning, everybody, and assalamualaikum to my dear friends and colleagues who are listening in. And for those that might not be familiar, just the phrase assalamualaikum just means peace be upon all of you. Yeah. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ashikin. I'm a mother, firstly. I'm a pediatrician and also a medical lecturer from Malaysia. So it's nice meeting all of you. I would like to really thank Ning. She's a good friend of mine who introduced me to Jen. And I learned lots of new things from both of them, a lot actually. So firstly, I would like to share what attracted me to the course. So what appealed to me most was how it combines the understanding of child development to promote breastfeeding. And I think this is actually a new perspective for me, actually. And the evidence underlying all this, because doctors, we just like evidence-based. As a pediatrician, I would say many of these ideas, they're not really foreign. However, what I have found that these hug strategies really help me to explain concepts that I know in a simpler manner to patients, right? Okay, so having a knowledge of a certain topic is only half the battle, but the ability to share it with your patients, that's the other half that you have to handle. So as what Jen keeps on telling us, um, um, what we teach the parent is as important as how we teach it. So even though we know it, it's not necessarily that we can tell them in a effective way. So how I've actually used this skill in my daily practice is I've actually learned to use little bits of skills here and there and incorporate it during the baby's routine follow-up and immunization sessions. So I will usually anticipate the growth and development for that particular baby when they walk in, right? And I'll share, scatter the information a little bit here, a little bit there during our routine conversations with the moms. And this really helps. And another thing that I find really helpful is actually I've become more vocal when examining patients. And as Jen puts it, I've become a commentator, just like a sports broadcaster, right? So I found that when I broadcast and comment as I'm during the developmental assessment or the neurodevelopmental assessment, it really helps parents to see like, wow, my baby can do that. So it's such a joy for me to see the parents going, oh, really, doctor? Oh, so I think it makes me feel happy. And sometimes they'll just go like, he's crying. That doesn't really mean he's hungry, is it, doctor? So this really allows me to continue the conversation in a more natural way. And it really helps me to get the patients to, or parents really, to understand what's happening and respond to their baby in an appropriate manner. So even though this doesn't take much more time than my usual clinic schedule, but I have actually observed, I haven't done any research, but from my observation, this deeper understanding actually has in some groups of them, I do say they're coming back and, oh, I'm still breastfeeding, and they're actually much happier. And I feel really happy about this. And just the last thing that I would like to share is all of us know the first 1,000 days of the child's life is probably the most important part of their life, because this is when their brain grows the fastest. So by us able to coach parents to understand their behavior and that different children have different temperament, it's not only about breastfeeding, but most importantly, I think this is actually empowering our parents towards helping to practice responsive and positive parenting, which would empower them to actually nurture their child to achieve their optimal growth potential. And I think as pediatricians, that's the gist of our work, wanting a child to develop and grow as optimally as possible.
Hi, I'm Ismazura, or Is for short. I'm a certified breastfeeding peer counselor with the Malaysian Breastfeeding Peer Counselor Association. Okay, I got to know Hug Your Baby from Dr. Ning a few years ago. It made me realize that babies have their own personality and feelings that need to be respected. And I really want to share this with all the parents. Since then, I usually start my counseling session by introducing myself not only to the mother, but also to the baby. Your mother told me that you two need help with breastfeeding. May I help you? Should we work together and help mommy? After that, she herself appears calmer, more relief and relaxed too. That usually helps to break the ice and easier for us to build trust. The mother is more confident with me. We are more comfortable and open with each other during the counseling session. Even though baby seems to be breastfeeding well, mother still feels like her breastfeeding problem is unresolved. Now, after learning about the baby's zone and the Hug Your Baby roadmap, I realized that her issues may seem like a breastfeeding problem, but it's actually more about misunderstanding baby's behavior and development. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Ning for introducing me to Hug Your Baby, and also to Jen for sharing her knowledge and experience. And yes, learning about Hug Your Baby has really helped me to help parents understand their baby better. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Is. What a lovely story, both of those. Gosh, we're right on time because I know all of you are busy and I want to honor your time for being with us. we are very grateful for this time together, and just look forward to your feedback about this information. As I said, we were hoping to have a follow-up meeting where we could maybe break into some breakout rooms and share ideas about if and how this information might be helpful to the folks you serve. And so I thought the last thing we would do is end up with one of our Hug Your Baby lullabies. My husband's a professional musician, and when he and I were out of the country sharing Hug Your Baby, he would study some of the different musical traditions in the countries we were visiting. And then we wrote some songs that we think help to teach about child development. So this is the song that helps to reinforce the 10 steps to breastfeeding success that we all know is part of the World Health Organization's mission.
Every baby who's born makes a mother's heart warm. Born in a circle of caring right from the start. Babies win our heart. In the first hour I get what my mom knows is best. Sleeping by mother's hand, I eat whenever I can. Every baby who's born makes a father's heart warm. Born in a circle of caring right from the start. Babies win our heart. Thriving with father's help, I get just mother's milk. If mom must be away, her milk's here night and day. Every baby who's born makes a family's heart warm. Born in a circle of caring right from the start. Babies win our heart. Mothers meet frequently with babies a lot like me. Everyone needs to share all the best ways to care. Every baby who's born makes a neighbor's heart warm.